Hi, and welcome back to the World War II Book Guy. Today I was going to talk about books that dealt with the Battle of France. But I started looking around the old library. Every World War II history covers the Battle of France. And it's also covered very, very well in a lot of the memoirs of the time. If you want to read it from the Allied side, you could read Montgomery's memoirs, or it's covered very well in Turn of the Tide, which is based on the diaries of Sir Alan Brooke. The German side, you could read Panzerleader from Heinz Guderian or Lost Victories from Erich von Manstein. If you want a deeper military dive, you could read Halder's War Diaries. If you're into creepy political side of it, you could read Goebbels' diaries as well. So it's covered everywhere. If you want a single book to read just about the Battle of France, I happen to really like Strange Victory. It's by Ernest May. It's a relatively new book. Came out around the year 2000. It's a big book. It's well balanced, well written, and it covers very well. And hell, I just love the title. But I want to talk about the battle because it's so unique. It is one of the most significant and most lopsided battles in history. The only one other battle you could really compare it to would be the Battle of Cannae. Now, I make that comparison because they're similar in a couple of ways. In both cases, to achieve a strategic victory, you have to have a good idea of what your opponent is going to do in a given situation, and believe that your opponent knows what you are going to do in a given situation, and then let them do what they want. Think that they are winning before you surprise them. And I think that that's what von Manstein, as a professional military person, was thinking about. Now, to quickly go over the Battle of Cannae, it was 216 BC. We're in Italy, and Hannibal has already defeated two Roman armies. But the Romans, being the Romans, they didn't give up. They just built an even bigger army. Ancient historians say about 86,000 troops against Hannibal's maybe 50,000. And they marched out to meet him. Now, Hannibal knew what the Romans would do in a given situation. Roman warfare wasn't subtle, but it was effective. You get a whole bunch of guys, particularly your heavy Roman infantry, and you charge right at the center of the opponent. You break their center, and then you slaughter them all. And Hannibal could see that coming. So what Hannibal did, knowing that that's what they were going to do, he's going to let them do it and let them think they were succeeding. So what he did differently was typically armies lined up like this. You're in a straight line with your cavalry on the wings, your infantry in the middle. He bowed his out, and he put in that bow out troops that he had faith in their ability to be steadfast, knowing that the Romans had attacked the center, which they did. And as they gradually pulled back, it bowed in. Now, that was a really tricky, dangerous thing to do because most of the slaughter that happened in ancient battles didn't happen in the battle itself. Happened when one of the sides broke and ran, and the other side just chased them down and slaughtered them. So he had to have faith that these troops could actually pull back. Whereas they pull back, the Romans think they're winning. They send more and more troops in there who are crammed more and more together. And now comes two surprises. One, the cavalry, Hannibal's cavalry, sweeps around the flank of the Roman cavalry, defeats their cavalry, sweeps around the back, hits them from behind, which the Romans kind of thought would happen. They knew their cavalry wasn't that good. But they kept pouring more troops into the center because they thought, well, we'll break their center and slaughter them before the threat becomes that bad to our rear. What Hannibal had done was behind his main line on either side of the center were some of his best infantry troops, the North Africans, the Numidians. And as the Roman infantry pushed farther and farther in, thinking they're about to victory, they were fallen upon from the flanks. They're crowded together. They're fighting all directions. Ultimate end, slaughter. Again, the ancient historians, a little bit different on the casualties, but of the 86,000, about 50,000 were killed. 15,000 got away. The balance were captured and turned into slaves, sold for slaves. So I think that von Manstein was thinking in those kind of terms. Now, the German army itself, conventional German army, was not thinking in those terms. They were thinking about rehashing the von Schlieffen plan, and they thought it would work this time, attacking through Belgium because of the success of the panzer divisions and the Luftwaffe in Poland. And now they had more panzer divisions. They had 10. Now, it was not an imaginative attack. It had very limited gains, in fact. It was only planned to capture the northern part of France as a base for further ground operations against the French, and the Channel ports, which allowed U-boats to use that to continue the naval war against the British. And that's the way it was looking. But von Manstein, thinking of the greater idea, the Cannae battle, came up with a different idea, a different plan. Now, how he sold that to Hitler and Hitler ultimately executed it, that's a whole other story, and it's interesting in itself. But they ended up going with von Manstein's plan. Now, this plan was different. Of the 10 armored divisions, 10 panzer divisions, only 3 would go into Belgium, just enough to convince the British and French that that was the main thrust. And the British and French, just like the Romans at Cannae, fell for it. They sent their armies up to the River Dye, and here come the Germans. Well, at the same time that's happening, the bulk of the German panzer divisions, 7 panzer divisions, are going through the Ardennes in Luxembourg. Now, the Ardennes, conventional wisdom, actually on both sides. The Germans didn't think it was passable near to the French and British, thought it was an impassable area. It was heavily wooded, rough terrain, very few roads. But Guderian led his panzers at the tip of this, and they imagine the backed up miles. They say the convoys went over 100 miles back into Germany. But once you come out of the Ardennes, you come out at the Meuse River at Sedan. Now, the French had extended the Maginot Line north of the Franco-German border through Luxembourg, but it was much less well built. And because they never expected an attack, it was second and third rate troops. So what happens? The Panzers get through, they cross the Meuse, they break through at Sedan, and they shoot for the coast. And all the while, the French and the British armies all tangled up in the northern part of France. Now, they had a few rough moments. There was supposed to be a coordinated counterattack against one of the spearhead divisions, Rommel's 7th Panzer at Arras. But as it turned out, the French never showed up. The British showed up with their Matilda tanks, which the German tanks couldn't penetrate, but that's one of the first times they said, well, let's just take the 88 flaks, level them, and knock them out. Anyway, they get there. So, much like Cannae, a strategic victory. Now, one of the things that the two battles have in common is the aftermath. Now, after Hannibal destroyed the Roman army at Cannae, his lieutenants, his commanders, tried to push him into going and attacking Rome. And for a couple of reasons, Hannibal didn't do that. And I think he was right in his thinking. First of all, while they destroyed the Roman army, the Romans would almost certainly be able to pull up a large number of troops to defend their capital. And Hannibal's troops had no experience with a siege. They didn't have the equipment for a siege. They didn't have the logistics to support their army while it was doing a siege, so he did not. Now, as we know, the war in Italy continued for a number more years till Scipio defeated Hannibal's forces and his brother in Spain, ultimately crossed over to North Africa, threatened the city of Carthage. Hannibal had to then leave Italy. He was defeated by Scipio, who we know in history as Scipio Africanus. The Germans faced a similar thing. What do you do with the victory? And what the aspect is, okay, let's go invade England. Let's end this war. And there are some similarities there. The British army was intact. It had been evacuated at Dunkirk, but it had no heavy equipment whatsoever. But there are also some things on the British side. The British Navy was much more powerful than the German Navy, particularly after its severe losses in the Norwegian campaign, and they still had a strong air force, in spite of the losses they had taken in the Battle of France and over Dunkirk. The Germans were ultimately unsuccessful in the Battle of Britain, and now this concept of taking a makeshift hodgepodge bunch of barges across the English Channel with the British Navy intact and the Air Force intact was not a good idea. And besides, Hitler had already turned his eyes to the east, wanted to go after France. So I compare these two battles. I think they're highly similar, highly significant. And like a lot of battles, even though they gained great strategic victory, the question that historians will always argue is, did they give away a greater opportunity not just to have a strategic victory, but to win the war? Anyway, until next time, I'm Michael, the World War II book guy. Thank you.